Welcome to everybody who has joined this How to Innovate in Today's World webinar, and thank you all for doing so. Let me first introduce myself. My name is Lavina Advani, and I'm the Digital Marketing Manager here at Imperial's Executive Education Division. I'm joined by Anu Wadhwa, Associate Professor of Strategy and Entrepreneurship at the Imperial College Business School. In the course of the next 30 to 40 minutes, Anu is going to walk you through how large established organizations renew and transform themselves and the challenges they face in doing so. Anu is bringing in practical insight from her role by supporting people on the ground practicing it. Feel free to ask any questions throughout the webinar using the questions box, and Anu will try and answer all of them at the end of the webinar. I'm now going to hand over to Anu, who will introduce herself.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the webinar on Idea to Innovation, Inspiring Entrepreneurship. Thank you for joining me today. My name is Anu Wadhwa. I am an Associate Professor of Strategy and Entrepreneurship at Imperial College Business School. I teach innovation management and entrepreneurship at this school and have been involved with several executive education programs on innovation. In my research, I look at how organizations renew themselves, what are the challenges they face in becoming more innovative, especially under so much uncertainty that the new technologies bring about for corporations today. So the business landscape in the 21st century is changing really fast. The average lifespan of a company has decreased from 61 years in 1958 to 15 years in 2012. 40% of the companies will be dead in the next 10 years. So technology feels like it is accelerating, and that's because it is. The speed at which markets are evolving due to innovation is at an all-time high. The time it takes for firms to reach 50 million users is shrinking extremely fast, and companies are getting disrupted. So it used to take airlines, for example, about 68 years to reach 50 million users. It took Twitter 2 years to reach 50 million users. It took Pokemon Go 19 days. So companies are getting disrupted partly because of new technologies. So think about the automotive industry. They are grappling with what to do about competition coming from electric vehicles, self-driving cars, 3D printed cars in some cases. Companies are also getting disrupted because competition is increasingly coming from outside the industry where it wasn't expected. So, for example, banking is facing increasing competition from the likes of Facebook, Google, Apple, all the little fintech startups, and so forth. So incumbents in many, many industries are really facing a lot of challenges on that front. All these changes mean that large firms are looking continuously at continuously innovating in order to stay ahead of the game. They must create, develop, and sustain innovative new businesses all the time. In fact, innovation is the single biggest challenge facing companies today. Everyone is talking about innovation. Everyone wants to be innovative. More than 60% of organizations use the term innovation in their vision statements or core principles. And according to a number of surveys, innovation has become a pretty common item on the agenda of the C-suite level and the boardroom level meetings. 84% of people recognize innovation is so important to their growth strategy. 80% recognize that their business models are at risk. And they also consistently spend huge sums of money on R&D, as you can see in the chart. Yet, it is no secret, innovation is difficult for well-established companies. Very few of these companies are satisfied with the outcome of their innovative efforts, and very few know what the problem is and how to improve. By and large, they try things, they're getting better at innovating, but still, they do struggle quite a bit to innovate, to become entrepreneurial, and to bring ideas to market. So let's take an example from digital imaging. So I hope some of you recognize what that first picture is. In 1976, Kodak used to account for 90% of film and 85% of camera sales in the US. And until the 1990s, it was a very popular brand. It was one of the world's 5 most valuable brands, in fact. By 2012, it had filed for bankruptcy and it had completely missed the digital imaging revolution. So, what happened to Kodak? This slide shows you the timeline for Kodak and the main events that happened to it. It was nearly killed by digital imaging in the end. Why did that happen? Was it a problem of awareness? Was it caught by surprise by the shift to digital imaging? Actually, that's not really what happened. Kodak was the company that invented the first digital camera in 1975. In 1979, there was an internal report written by a Kodak executive that forecasted that all photograph markets would shift to digital by 2010. They were the ones developing the most advanced image sensors for digital cameras in the 1980s. They brought their first megapixel CCD in 1986. So they were doing a lot in the digital area for a very long time. So was it a problem of resources then? Again, that's not really the answer either. Between the period 1982 to 1992, Kodak spent about $5 billion on digital imaging R&D. They had the cash to invest, they had a brand name, they had the technology. Yet again, when Sony came out with the first digital camera for the consumer market, Kodak executives dismissed digital as being inferior to film. And at the same time, in 1994, when they had a new CEO and they developed their very first digital camera for Apple, the equity analysts killed them, saying that Kodak is squandering investors' money on digital nonsense. So by the time they recovered from all of this, and by the time their annual report started mentioning consumer digital camera sales and starting to say that digital is actually core to Kodak's strategy, they had kind of missed the boat. The same thing happened with Polaroid. They also missed the rise of digital imaging at about the same time. They had pioneered instant film, and they believed that growth will come from the sale of more and more instant film. And they were also a leader in the instant film market in the 1960s and 70s. Like Kodak, they were not a stranger to digital imaging. They had filed patents on electronic shutters as early as the mid 1960s. Yet they also, like Kodak, spent a lot of their R&D budget on digital imaging, but they were not able to make digital cameras a success. So it wasn't a problem of awareness. It wasn't a problem of ability. It wasn't a problem of resources. So what was it? It was mostly a problem of the short-term emphasis on current businesses and what they're producing. So it's a fear of cannibalization of their core businesses. Film used to have 75% gross margins at the time as compared to hardware sales, which is what digital imaging is all about, which had much lower margins. So it's very difficult to kill such businesses. There was a lot of anxiety among the executives about new competencies, new competitors, new business models. And they had a great emotional attachment, for very good reasons, to their current razor and blade business model that focused on chemical film. So they weren't really appreciating the need for a new business model other than what they had seen so far. And the same story repeats itself in other industries and in other times. What you see is Nokia CEO on the cover of Forbes in 2007. And then the iPhone came this challenge came from the computer industry in that same year, and Nokia was gone in less than 10 years. The same problem happened with BlackBerry, Blockbuster. And so you see that in the history of corporations, we see a lot of these very large, very successful companies being disrupted and not really able to recover from that disruption. And in my own research, I've found similar trends where we find that firms find it very difficult to renew themselves and to drastically change their core industries and markets. So in a research project that I'm working on currently with some co-authors, we decided to see why and when do some large firms engage in strategic renewal? Why and when do they change their existing ways on which they compete? So organizational change will happen typically in two ways. The first way is that firms change incrementally. They will launch new peripheral businesses that are kind of adjacent to their core business, and they can improve their operational effectiveness in their current businesses. They can innovate on their current products, or they can build upon their core current competencies. The second way is slightly difficult, which is what we call discontinuous strategic renewal. So firms, in order to do this, will have to engage in radical innovations in revolutionary practices that are new to their industry, or they might completely change their core industry. So an example would be Nokia, which started out 150 years ago as an operator of a pulp mill. Then it got into the rubber and cable businesses, and then in the 1990s finally focused on telecom, and in particular mobile telephony. So we were interested in this second kind of discontinuous renewal. And we looked at the Fortune 500 cohort of 1990. And we followed these firms for 20 years, all the way up to 2010. And what we were looking for were significant and permanent changes in their primary businesses. Did they change their core industry extremely significantly? And the new industry then became their primary industry. And what we found was that in this entire 20-year period of looking at 500 corporations, it only happened 66 times, which is not surprising given whatever I've been saying so far. This was typically driven by when firms saw that their performance was declining. And usually when the firms that were actually undertaking strategic discontinuous renewal were the ones that were always changing a little bit anyway. So they were engaging in incremental renewal all the time. And they were also the firms that were a little bit more diversified, had more business portfolios. They were creating new businesses all the time as well. So what can organizations do about this? What should firms do to improve their chances at becoming more innovative and entrepreneurial? How can they be more proactive? Firms typically complement their traditional approaches to R&D and business development with a number of innovation tools. Depending on the type of innovation the company is looking for, is it disruptive or incremental? What kind of effect it wants to have, whether it's a product innovation, process innovation, a business model innovation, etc. It can use different types of tools, such as M&A, corporate venture capital, incubators, traditional R&D, etc. Some of these are external to the company. So, for example, engaging with startups through corporate venture capital, setting up external incubators and accelerators, and having strategic partnerships. These are all external initiatives. And the idea is to access external knowledge, external sources of ideas, knowledge, and innovation. The other tools are internal to the company. The goal here is to promote an entrepreneurial mindset and to generate entrepreneurial activities within the firms. Typically, firms would do this by incentivizing employees, by enabling them to create new ideas, to come up with new ventures internally. Examples of these initiatives are innovation labs that many corporations operate today. Also, hackathons, idea contests, etc., help quite a bit. And the purpose of all of these activities is to enable firms to search for innovation that can complement their internal R&D efforts and improve their speed and agility in innovations. Now, no matter which mix of external or internal innovation tools firms embrace, the key challenge still remains for firms is, do they have good processes for innovations embedded within their organization? Do they incentivize employees enough? Are they able to drive innovation and creativity from within? And here again, we have some exemplars where companies have adopted different approaches. So let me take the example of Adobe. Adobe has a new innovation process called the Kickbox. It has been quite successful and was started as a challenge by one of their leading executives in innovation, where they challenged their employees and they gave them a kickbox. And they asked them to participate in a 2-day workshop that took them through whatever the kickbox had inside. So essentially, it's an actionable innovation process. It is designed for both individuals and organizations. It is a 6-step process. Employees take a workshop, and the idea is for employees to learn how can they discover new opportunities, how to come up with new ideas, how to validate those ideas, how to evaluate new business potential, etc. So this red box includes all the tools that will help innovators define, refine, validate, and evolve their idea within the firm. So it's really encouraging a lot of entrepreneurship in the company. So what's in the red box? What's in the red box is everything that innovators inside a company will typically say is stopping them from innovating. So first, there is a $1,000 prepaid credit card inside the box to fund research and experimentation over 8 weeks. Now, this is significant because this is seed money, and Adobe doesn't ask them to give any receipts. There is no accountability. In fact, they don't even have to tell anybody how they spent this money. It's just theirs to spend. And the idea is you use your best judgment, spend it on the right thing. For employees who have certain ideas and they want to validate them, they might go and acquire domain names, or to engage with real customers. They might pay with this money some polling or research services. They might buy search engine advertising, whatever it is. They don't have to tell anybody. They could just go have coffee with it. And then there are instructions for each level. There are things like a scorecard that Adobe encourages them to use. There is a business model canvas, how to use it. There is an electronic timer for individuals to have focused ideation sessions. There are notebooks. There is a bad idea notebook because Adobe believes that all first ideas look like bad ideas. The key is to then take them and to evolve them into something that will work for the company. They have Post-it notes for ideation sessions. They have a Starbucks card. They have chocolate bars inside. So that's what's in the red box. And so employees come in. They are asked if they want to participate in the red Kickbox program. And then of the people that take up the challenge, they have to validate 6 steps. The first step is inception, where employees are asked to really pinpoint exactly why they want to innovate. What is their motivation to innovate? Because Adobe believes if you don't have the passion for it, your idea is not going to come to anything. So they're really asked to think quite carefully about that. The second step is ideating, which is to use some insights with either external inputs or internal inputs, and then generate ideas, capture those ideas. The third step is to improve. Now, here, the key thing is to identify the right ideas from the previous step and to improve them further. So here, employees are learning how to grow bad ideas into good ideas and learn to tell which is which. Step 4 is investigate. Here, this is when you go out and test the idea in the real world, check if it's valuable, validate the problem, validate the solution by going to the customers. Step 5 is iterate. You experiment with these ideas and make them better, which means you've collected some customer data in the previous step, and then you use that, you analyze that data and evolve your hypotheses. Most people will start to run out of money, that 1,000 by this time. And the last step is to infiltrate, which is to pitch the idea with your results to senior leader to get more resources within the organization. So you're selling the idea to someone in your organization, and you're bringing experimental data that you've collected so far to prove your point. So of all the people who were asked to participate, 92% completed the first stage, and 6% finished all 6 stages, and then they were given a blue box. There were 23 of them. So what's in the blue box, we don't know, but I'm guessing that it's some sort of it's another process to take the idea one step further within the organization, because these are all promising ideas which have passed the first sniff test. And this entire Kickbox idea has been so popular that Adobe open sourced it. And now in Switzerland, Swisscom, for example, is actually taking this idea and using it not only inside their organizations, but they've made it sort of like a platform that many organizations can use to innovate. Let's take another example. Another company that has tried to do something very differently again from Adobe, IBM. IBM is a very big company, and for IBM to stay nimble and to enable change is really, really difficult. So, how can one foster the climate of entrepreneurship to grow new businesses within such a big company? So, in 1999, IBM had an internal study done about, well, how exactly are they starting new businesses in the company and what are the typical difficulties? And what they were told were things that we have heard from most large organizations. Well, that rewards are directed at short term results. So, this comes at the cost of strategic business building, that IBM focuses on listening very intensely to their current customers, which is what all good organizations should do. But then it frequently misses new business models, new markets, new classes of decision makers altogether. Another problem is that the expense and the revenue ratios, they drive the planning process. So new businesses have very unrealistic overhead allocations, which becomes a problem. IBM also has a long history on relying on factual financial analysis when they make investment decisions. But this is a problem when there is really no market yet for your new idea. So you can't really have any kind of realistic um, financial financial analyses done. Another problem was that innovative business ideas lack sponsorship, they lack attention, and then when budgets are tight, these ideas are cut. Um, Other problems were that many IBM ventures fail because there is just absence of sustained funding. So all of these were problems that this internal study identified. And then the CEO, Lou Gerstner, at the time, was really aware that when you have big organizations, they have strong cultures, and they can be impediments to change and adaptation. And he knew that you know, he knew that it was very difficult, first of all, to have clarity about strategic directions, and then second, to get consensus in the organization about your strategic direction. So what he did was he appointed an EBO czar. EBO stands for Emerging Business Opportunities. And this czar was someone whose responsibility it was to change this very huge organization that by that time had seven groups and 37 business units. They came up with an organization that focused on three types of innovations simultaneously. They call them the three horizons of growth. The first horizon was your traditionally run businesses. These were the cash cows. So the innovations in the horizon, in the first kind of horizon, was really around those things that incrementally improved these existing businesses, and they were necessary for IBM to survive and to grow. So that's horizon one, and they were typically shorter projects. Horizon 2 was the next generation projects. These were the fast growing potential stars. These were projects that needed quite a bit of resources, and they needed, chief executive officers that were willing to take risks with these projects. These are the businesses that have the capability to become Horizon 1 businesses in the future. The third horizon was emerging projects. These were startup or seed businesses, which are based completely on new ideas, completely on new business concepts. And these might not be ideas and concepts that are in alignment with the current business of any firm. So these projects typically carry a high risk of failure. But these are the projects that would be responsible for laying the foundation of the company's long-term future. So the czar said, well, we are going to simultaneously innovate in all these three horizons. And they provided a financial support. They created an internal pool of about 100 million US dollars to fund this initiative. And they also created an evaluation process, which was different from the normal corporate processes to evaluate these EBOs. They pursued 7 emerging business opportunities in the year 2000. These brought them about $1 billion extra in revenue. This was 90% of this came from the top 3 performers. They pursued 18 EBOs 6 years later in 2006, and the increase from into the share of the increase in the revenues from these 18 EBOs was 6 billion. So no doubt, this sort of a process that they pursued for over 10 years was responsible for IBM's successful shift from the hardware business to becoming a software services firm. So what is our program all about? So from idea to innovation is an immersive hands-on learning experience that contributes to a mindset change. It inspires participants to become to learn the tools of innovating, to innovate in all functions, no matter what function they're in. The idea is for the participants to take on the role of change agents and help bring about new mindsets and new ways of thinking in the companies that they work. It is a 4-day program, and it runs from 24 to 27 June in 2019. We are accepting applications for a limited number of seats. So if you are an individual or a corporation that would like to learn about the latest tools and approaches for becoming more innovative, for becoming more entrepreneurial, and for generating more impactful ideas, then this is the course for you. The program will be delivered by faculty at the Imperial College Business School. And these are faculty that are not only world-class teachers with a lot of experience in executive education, they're also very well known for their groundbreaking research in their respective fields. So here is a sample overview timetable. A sample of the sessions that we propose to have. So for example, on day 1 and 2, we will have sessions on design thinking. This is a very different approach to finding, what is a key problem that actually needs solving. Part of day 3, you will spend on the softer issues within the organization that hinder adaptation and change in organizations. So how do you frame the innovation vision? How do you frame your innovation narrative within the organization? How do you get support for it? So we'll spend some time doing that. We'll also look at working in teams in order to take the ideas to innovation. For example, on day 4, we will spend on learning about what are different types of innovations, what are disruptive changes, how do you think about them in the context of your industry. How do you protect and commercialize innovations? How do you organize the company around entrepreneurship and innovation? So all of this will be done through either immersive experiential exercises, or you'll be doing case studies, and the Imperial College Business School faculty will be taking you through this program, and hopefully you come away from it having learned some new tools, appreciating the strategic importance of innovation, and understanding exactly what are business opportunities, how do you use the business model canvas, for example, to generate compelling business models, how do you effectively communicate and collaborate. So there's a host of different things that we will be doing, all geared towards making individuals more entrepreneurial and innovative within large organizations. So this is all I have for today. If you have any questions, I'm here to answer them, and we'll try to answer them the best that we can. Thank you so much for attending. So here is a question called the razor blade business model. So what is a razor and blade business model? So all of you that are men and shave and have razors, what is it that you spend your money on? You buy a razor and that costs you something, but then it's the blades that you keep buying, that you keep spending your money on. That's the frequent purchase that you make. So that's a razor and blade business model, which says that the money that the organization is really making is on the blades and not the razor. So once they sell you the razor, you're going to buy the blades. And that's why you find that, every 6 months or every year, companies like Gillette will introduce a new razor that doesn't work with the old one, the old blades that you have. So you have to start buying new blades. And so it's really describing where the money is coming from. So in the example that I gave of Kodak, the razor is the camera, which you buy once, but what consumers paid for was the film, and that was the blade. That's what you have to. That's where the company made its money from, and they had as much as 65% gross margin on the sales that they made of chemical film. So another question is, how useful is the course you mentioned to small and medium enterprises, to SMEs? I would say it's quite useful, because what's happening, if you look at the ecosystem of large companies these days, and I said they were using both external as well as internal innovation tools. I talked about corporate venture capital, for example. So this is the idea that large companies are funding startups outside with the idea of either acquiring them later or partnering with them at some point. So I think it doesn't matter whether you're an individual inside with a new idea or a small or medium enterprise outside that hopes to engage with a big company. The kinds of impediments that you have to overcome are still the same. The kinds of approaches that you have to take are still the same. So I think it's still quite useful if your small and medium enterprise is hoping to take an idea and take it through and to make a business case for it in any kind of situation. There is a question about whether the copy of the slides will be available. And so, yes, these slides will be made available after this webinar. There is another question that says, what are the factors to look out for, if any, to predict what are the future needs of society? This is a very big question. So I would say that there are a lot of factors that one can look out for. The factors, if you wanted to look for factors, I think it's all coming from the new kinds of technologies that are really changing the way society behaves. It's changed our behavior, our day-to-day lives. And that's what should be the key pressing thing that we have to look out for. The other thing I would say is if you have to predict what the future needs of society are going to be, it's extremely hard. In fact, in this program that we have the first session is going to be run by a futurist. And he's actually going to come in and talk about the dangers of predicting based on what we know today. Because everything is changing so fast, technology is accelerating so fast that we really have a great deal of difficulty predicting what's going to be the state of society, the state of technology, how will we be working, how will organizations be working with their employees, let's say 30 years from now. It's quite difficult to predict. So that's one of the things that we will talk about. How exactly do you plan for a future which is essentially governed by a lot of uncertainty and is essentially not predictable? You can't extrapolate anymore the lessons of the past into the future. So what you have to think about is a continuously innovating mind that looks at what they have available and tries to make the best of it, but with the clear recognition that everything might change in the next 10 years. So it's about being adaptive to whatever you see in front of you. So if there are any other questions, we are here. I'm going to hand back to my colleague, Lavina.
Thank you, Anu. Thank you so much for all your questions and for all the insight there. If you want to contact us with any further questions, then that's my email address on screen, l.advani@imperial.ac.uk. For any questions on the Idea to Innovation training course, please contact my colleague Jose. Again, his email address is on the screen as well. Lastly, I'd like to thank everyone who has been involved in this webinar, and special thanks to Anu for taking the time to help us pull together this webinar. Enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.